All right, so I want to speak about Rosh Hashana, and as I very often try to do, to speak about Rosh Hashana in a unique kind of way. To get to what I want to say about Rosh Hashana, I need to dance around a little bit and to bring us to a few places, and then eventually we'll get to Rosh Hashana. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that in the very, very beginning of Pirkei Avos we discussed, that the Mishnah says about two rabbis by the name of Shmaya and Avtalion, that they say that El v'samalacha, that you have to love work, usna es harabanos, and you have to hate the hate authority, v'al tisvada l'rashos, and that you can't attach yourself to authority figures. Then the second rabbi of that group says that rabbis, you should be careful with what you say because maybe you'll end up in exile and you'll be in a place of bitter waters, and that your students are going to drink from the waters and it is going to be harmful to them, and that the name of heaven they're going to die and the name of heaven is going to be desecrated. Very difficult to understand what those two Mishnayos are trying to teach us. Because we say, El v'samalacha, that you have to love work. Loving work is a very strong word, love work. Plus, we know that really what's the essence of our lives is all about Torah. It's not necessarily about working. So what does it mean to love work? And what does it mean, sina es harabanos, that we have to hate authority? Again, a very strong word, hate authority. Stay away from authority, be wary of authority, be careful with authority. But what does it mean to hate authority, to hate that kind of thing? And what is it telling the rabbis? That the rabbis have to be careful not to, the rabbis have to be careful with their words, because maybe their words their students are going to have to follow. They're going to end up in Golus, in exile. Their students are going to follow them. And then the students are going to drink from the bad waters around, and then the students are going to die, and the name of heaven is going to be desecrated. What's that talking about? What's this Mishnah? What's the message of the Mishnah? We know that there is a concept, there is a halacha, a mitzvah in the Torah called the mitzvah of Shemitah. Once every 7 years, the land of Israel has to lie fallow, and that you can do no work in the land of Israel. You can do no planting, no plowing. You can do no reaping for sale. You can't sell in the produce. The land becomes what's called a hefker. It becomes open to everyone. Anybody who wants can come in and take from your trees. And we know that we suffered a 70-year exile after the destruction of the first temple until the building of the second temple. And that there was 70 years that we spent in Bavel until the rebuilding of the second Beis HaMikdash. This is the rebuilding of the second temple. And our rabbis explained to us that what's the reason for the 70-year exile was because we had desecrated 70 shmitos, 70 cycles of the 7-year cycle, and that we had worked the land 70 times when we shouldn't have, which is over a period of 490 years. There's over 70 cycles of this 7-year cycle. So we did not keep the Shemitah. And because we desecrated the Shemitah, we desecrated the Sabbath of the land. So then therefore we suffered for 70 years, each year cleansing one of those Shmitos that we desecrated. Very difficult to understand how the Jewish people as a whole could not keep the mitzvah of Shemitah. The mitzvah of Shemitah is very unique. God tells us that we should let the land lie fallow once every 7 years, and then he tells us that I promise you, because you're going to ask me, what am I going to eat in those in the seventh year? If I'm not working the land and I'm not plowing and I'm not planting and I'm not doing the normal things, then what exactly am I going to eat? God says, don't worry, because in the 6th year, you're going to produce 3 times the amount. and that you'll have enough to feed yourself on the 6th year, enough to feed yourself on the 7th year, and enough to feed yourself on the 8th year until the new crops start to grow. And this was a promise in biblical times. It was not anything that you had to scratch your head and wonder. All you had to do was to look at your books, and you would see that either your land produced 3 times the amount of crops in the 6th year, or it produced the same amount of crops, but it lasted you for 3 times as much. Whichever way it manifested itself, it was a clear promise, and it was a clear result. There was no doubt. You could see it with your eyes. The return on the mitzvah was right there. It was in your bank account. It was on your table. So then why wouldn't we be able to keep Shemitah? What was motivating us not to keep Shemitah? That God says other mitzvahs will give you a long life, will give you a life in the world to come. Okay, I can't see that. So I can't trust that. I can understand why I would desecrate other mitzvahs. But why would I desecrate a mitzvah where the promise is right there, where the downside of it is right there also? If I don't keep Shemitah, then I'm not getting that 3 years worth of produce. So why would I even bother gambling with the mitzvah of Shemitah? So I'm going to tell you a critical principle from which we're going to develop everything tonight. Our rabbis tell us that Adam la'amal yulad. Man was created to work. Man was created to work. So we have to ask ourselves the question, why did God make such a system? That he created man to produce things. Because we have to realize that the talents that we have, the way we identify ourselves. We say, I'm a good this, I'm a good that. I've got this talent, this ability. That's not us. That's God. God gave me a brain. God gave me a voice. God gave me an ability to act. God gave me an ability to be sensitive. Whatever talent that I have, that talent is not me. That's God. Me is what I produce, is what I do with that talent. And that productivity, that thing that I make with the talents that I've been given, that which I create with the talents that I've been given, that becomes my identity. That's who I am. Now, there are 2 ways to identify ourselves. We can identify ourselves, we could produce in the world, in the physical world, in physical things, and we could become great doctors, great lawyers. We could become builders. Or we could take that productivity, that need to work, and we can create ourselves as spiritual giants. We can identify ourselves as being sensitive, warm, caring, loving, spiritual, connected to God kind of people. There was a machlokas between 2 great rabbis by the name of Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Yishmael said that if you look at the Shema says that you have to plant your fields. I will give you rain, your fields will grow. And if you look throughout the Torah, it talks about reaping, and it talks about planting, and it talks about plowing, which means that Adam la'amal yulad, a person has to work, and that's why we're here, and that though we need to be spiritual and connect ourselves to God, we also need to take care of ourselves and to build our identity, to be able to produce something, to do something physical in this world. Comes along Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the cave rabbi. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, the one who spent 13 years immersed in Torah in a cave, and he says, no, it's not true. When the Torah talks about working in production, the Torah is talking about that other people will work for you. Your job is to sit and to learn Torah, to be involved in spirituality and spiritual pursuits. Your physical world will be taken care of. God will take care of it. He will send other people to do that for you, and you need to sit and learn. That's where we produce ourselves. That's where we identify ourselves. That's where we make ourselves into something. It's through our spiritual accomplishments, not through our physical accomplishments. And one of the great sages comes along and says, many, many people tried to do it like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and they failed miserably. Many followed the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael that they combined work in the physical world with work in the spiritual world, and they succeeded. And the reason is because it's very difficult to find our identity in spiritual accomplishments, because you don't see spiritual accomplishments. Physical accomplishments you see them in the bank. You see them on your table. You see them in your life. You see them in your vacations. But material accomplishments, very difficult. Spiritual accomplishments, it's much more difficult to see those. Every once in a while, you're faced with a test. You have a challenge in your life, and you climb over that challenge, and you realize, wow, I've really grown as a human being. But it's not every day that we get that. And therefore, the rabbis say that the proper way for most people is actually an integration of both. And the reason why that's the proper way is because once you learn how to produce in the physical world, you go to work, you have a productive day, you come home productive. And now you can take that productivity, you can take that ability to achieve, and you can turn it into your spiritual accomplishments. You can use it to study Torah, you can use it to become a finer human being. You have the energy to be able to and the desire to find some kind of meaning in the spiritual things that you do. But when you're dragged down, when there is no productivity, there is nothing coming from you, so then you search for places of productivity, but it's very difficult to put that into the spiritual world. When we learn productivity in one area, then it gives us the energy to be able to produce in the other area, in the spiritual area. And that's the reason why we couldn't keep Shemitah. Because what are we told during Shemitah? We're told, don't produce. Don't work the land. Let it lie fallow. But I want you only to study Torah during that year. That's what you're meant to be doing. But to pour our production into that, to identify ourselves that way, that's a very difficult thing to do. And we couldn't, as regular human beings, withstand that challenge. And therefore we went down to our fields, even though we were commanded not to plant and to plow, we went down to plant and plow. Because we had no other way to do it, because we Adam la'amal yulad, we were created to work, we were created to produce, and we had no other choice in ourselves. And therefore we broke the Shemitah. Therefore we broke that commandment. Even though we knew that it was going to bring us money, was going to bring us enough food for 3 years, that wasn't enough. We weren't going to feel productive. That's why the Mishnah says, Ehov es hamalacha. Love work. Because the word ava is the same gematria, the same numerical value as the word echad. It's how we become one, how we become whole with ourselves, is by producing, identifying who we are, not just what we do. And that's why we're told, usna es harabanos, that we have to hate authority. Because what's authority? Authority is not something that I create. Authority is something that's given to me. You have to give me authority over you. I don't earn that authority. It's not a part of my production. It's something that you give me. And therefore, authority, it represents things that we receive from other people. And if you love that, then you're loving what others give you rather than what you achieve yourself. And that's why sneis harabanas, that we have to hate the authority, hate things that people give us. That's why our rabbis tell us, Sone matanos yichya, that a person who hates matanos, who hates gifts, that person will live long. Because what does that mean? That if you hate when you hate what you get from others, you hate feeling dependent upon other people, of finding your identity through that which people confer on you and not through that which you have identified and worked on yourself, so then you're not alive. A soine matanas, a person who hates that, yichya, that person will be alive. Because life is all about creating ourselves, of making ourselves into something, of turning ourselves into something. And ultimately what this mission is about, it's about independence. It's teaching us that we have to exist from our own work, from our own striving, using the talents that we were given to create something of ourselves. Snoas harabanos, that we have to not rely on the powers that other people give us. And the altisvada, that we shouldn't hang around with authority. That means we have to stay away from with that and not create our identity based on the people around us. But it has to be based on who we are. And as we're going to develop, not based on what we do, not based on merely just the actions that we take, but based on the character of who we become through our producing ourselves, through our creating of ourselves. It's very fascinating that these two rabbis that said this were Shmaya and Avtalion. Shmaya and Avtalion were offspring of a fellow by the name of Sancheiriv. Sancheiriv wasn't Jewish. Sancheiriv was the king that exiled the 10 tribes from Israel. And that's why we have this concept of the 10 lost tribes. Sancheiriv was a genius. And what Sancheiriv did is that instead of, when he conquered the world, instead of killing his enemies, he weakened them by taking people from one place and putting them in another. And he took people from China and he put them in Mesopotamia, and people from Mesopotamia, and he put them in Africa. And he switched people around from place to place. And by doing that, he took away their identity. And when you destroy your identity, so then you have no power. Shmaya and Avtalion were offspring of his that somewhere along the line converted to Judaism, and they were the head of the Sanhedrin. They were head of the rabbinical court, and were particularly sensitive to people that didn't have an identity, and saw in their generation people that had lost their identity. And that's the reason why they spoke about Eovis HaMalachos Nasar Abanas, of loving being productive and creating yourself. Somebody with a sense of independence, and I don't have the time to develop this, but somebody with a sense of independence has the ability to be able to create independent students and independent children. One of the dangerous things is that, sometimes you look at a child who's 10, 11, 12, and they're frum and they're into it and they love Judaism and they love coming to shul and everything is incredible. And then they hit 13 and 14 and they don't want to know about it. And you wonder what happened. I got a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They used to be so cute and they used to be so into it and it used to be so easy to get them involved. And now they're so distant. What's happened in 1 year? So the truth is that we've taught them how to do the things they do, but not how to become the things they do. Not how to find their identity and to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And that's what Avtalion says. He says, be careful that if you're going to end up, your students are going to end up outside of their comfort zone. Be careful on how you teach them, because they can end up drinking from the dirty waters around. In other words, they could end up seeing all the influences around them and not have the strength to be able to identify who they are and to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. The Mishnah taught us in the very beginning of Pirkei Avos, Hamidu Tamidim Harbe, that we have to stand up many students. Stand up means make them independent, give them an ability to be able to know who they are, who themselves are, and to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. But a teacher or a parent who is an authoritarian, who loves shrara, who loves authority, is going to create a student who collapses when they're faced with a challenge. Because the whole point of everything that we do is so that we make ourselves and we achieve the things that we do in order to be able to protect us from a thing called nama de kisufa. Nama de kisufa means the bread of shame. When you get something for nothing, it's worth nothing. When we get things from the outside, all it causes us is shame. When we're not independent and we're reliant on other people, in the end of the day, it just brings shame if that's the way we live our lives. If we're shaped because of what everybody else is doing and all the energy around us is going in that direction, and that's what shapes us, then there's nothing inside of us. And in the end of the day, we're left as these empty vessels. But if we develop ourselves, if we work on ourselves, if Adam la'amal yulad, if we recognize that working and putting effort into who we are is something that's critical for our lives, so then we become something, we're alive. And even though at the end of the day, most people prefer handouts, most people would much rather snas hamalacha, would hate to work, and elves harabanas would much more love it, would be much happier if we would get everything given to us on a silver platter. The truth is, we get nothing. Getting to this place of developing ourselves, of working on ourselves, of emulating God and connecting ourselves to Him, of taking of producing something and becoming something with all the gifts that God's given us, and then understanding that independence, that ability to create ourselves, that ability to be able to make ourselves, that is godly, that it involves tremendous amount of making demands on ourselves. To get to these places and to reach the heights that we never considered before involves taking responsibility for our time, taking responsibility for our actions, and taking control of our attitudes. It requires us to do a tremendous amount of work if we want to have inner growth, if we want to produce something and make ourselves into something. Because that's the only reason that we were put on this earth. It wasn't to build a business. It wasn't to see the world. It wasn't to find physical pleasure. But the reason that we were put on this earth was in order to be able to build ourselves, to be able to turn ourselves into God-like human beings that have some substance to them and that attach themselves to God. That's our life's goal. To create an identity not by doing, but by being. When we talk in the context of Judaism, most of what we see is what people do. We identify religious people as people that do mitzvahs, when in fact the religious person is a person that becomes their mitzvahs. That a person can do many things, but if they aren't magnificent human beings, if they aren't beautiful people, if they aren't sensitive people, if they aren't spiritual people that understand the value of the things that are in this world and what are priorities and what's important, if they don't become that, so then they haven't accomplished what they were put here on the earth to accomplish. We identify success in Judaism as the things we do, not the people we become. And that's a terrible mistake. Because it's not just about what we do. The what we do has to be about what we become. We stand on Rosh Hashana, and in the first bracha of the Shemona Esrei, we say a very important line that we repeat every single day of the 10 days of repentance. Zachreinu lechayim, melech chafetz b'chayim. Right? Remember us for life. The king who wants life. V'kosveinu b'sefer hachayim, and write us down in the book of life. Lemancha, for your sake, the God of life. Now, I guarantee you 90% of people are thinking that what they're asking for is to be written in the book of life and to live, to make it through another year. But that's not what we're doing. And the reason I know that that's not what we're doing is because two reasons. First of all, in that section, you can't ask for personal things. In that section of the Shemona Esrei, that's about praising God, you can't ask for personal things there, halachically. And if you look at the end of the Shemona Esrei, you'll see that there we say, Uchsov l'chayim tovim, for good life to all the people in the world. B'sefer chayim bracha v'shalom, u'parnasa tova, nizocher v'nikosev. Right, in the book of good life, in the book of good parnasa, we should be written and we should be sealed. So we're asking for that already. Later on in the Shemona Esrei. So what are we doing here? We are recognizing that what is life all about? Life is all about identifying ourselves as creatures that were created by God and that need to find God in their lives and need to put God inside of the things that they do so that we become godly. Zochreinu l'chayim, remember us for life, for real living. And real living is independence. Real living is developing ourselves, turning ourselves into something, producing something with ourselves, becoming something. Lema'ancha elikim chayim. It's all ultimately for your sake, God. You know, there's an inherent contradiction in Rosh Hashana. Rosh Hashana is the Yom Adin, it's the Day of Judgment. Rosh Hashana is also a Yontif. The proper greeting on Rosh Hashana, well, first of all, the proper greeting on Rosh Hashana is not Happy New Year. That's for another time. With a little hat on your head and a little blower in your mouth. Sweet, Happy New Year. That's not Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, first night, we say to each other, Lashana Tova, Techaseh v'Sechosem, you should be written for a good year. Written and inscribed in a good year. Who's going to write you and inscribe you for a good year? You are. If you look in the Yerusana Tokef, that incredible prayer in Musaf on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we talk about the awesomeness of the day. And it says in that book, that's your life, you are going to write what's in that book. So there's this dichotomy, there is this contradiction in Rosh Hashanah that on the one hand, it's a petrifying day. On the other hand, it is a joyous, exhilarating day. We say good yontif to each other. We have meals, elaborate, beautiful meals where we pour energy into the kinds of foods that we eat on Rosh Hashanah. What are we celebrating? It's the day we're being judged. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? Mi yichya mi yomus. Who's going to live? Who's going to die? Mi yishalev. Who's going to live a peaceful life? Who's going to live a life of turmoil? It's petrifying. What's the joy? But rather, the celebration is a celebration of accepting responsibility. Accepting responsibility for actions to earn our own existence. That we recognize that all we have to do on Rosh Hashanah is to make a decision that we are going to make ourselves into something, and this is who we want to be. My actions will get there. Fixing what I did in the past, I'll get there. Making sure that the future is going to be better, I'll get there. That's not Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is the joy inherent in the realization that if I decide to produce something, if I decide to become something, when I decide to become something, that's joy, because that's living. Because that's what I was put here to do. Adam la'amal yulad. I was created to work, to produce something. And all I have to do on Rosh Hashanah is to decide that this is who I want to be. And God then gives me the resources to make that happen. The joy of the Yontif is revealing the fact that we want to make our thoughts and our actions accountable. And that we have a vision and a drive for greatness. And a willingness to push ourselves beyond our comfort zones. That's the reason why we have this crazy minhag of Rosh Hashanah. Not to sleep, first day of Rosh Hashanah. Not take a nap. Thank God rabbis are exempt. Shofar blowers and chazonim. Because, they're exhausted. They gotta keep davening, keep doing things. If they fall asleep, it's not considered terrible. But if a person goes to sleep on Rosh Hashanah, so the rabbis say that if a person sleeps on Rosh Hashanah, they'll have a sleepy year. What are you threatening me? Like, what is that? I have a sleepy year because I went to sleep on Rosh Hashanah. I'm tired. Stop it. What's wrong with that? Because what's Rosh Hashanah all about? What's God looking at on Rosh Hashanah? God is not Santa Claus. I know it's a shock, but God's not Santa Claus. God's not sitting with every Jewish boy and girl on his knee and saying, were you a good boy this year? That's not what's happening in Rosh Hashanah. God is looking at us, B'asher hu sham, where we are at that moment. What's important to you? Is developing yourself important to you? Is grabbing every moment of your life and living it to its fullest, not by having fun, but by having meaning? Is that important to you? And that's what God's looking at in Rosh Hashanah. And if on Rosh Hashanah afternoon you get into your jammies and you go take a nap, I'm not talking about when you fall asleep at the table, when you sit in your chair and you fall asleep. I'm talking about when you go take a nap. HaKadosh Baruch is looking at that and saying, really? That's what's important to you? That's the exact opposite of what we should be doing on Rosh Hashanah. If Rosh Hashanah is a day of growth and showing that we desire what we desire, real life, so then we have to be engaged in real life. Let God see what's valuable to us. Let God see what we plan on creating this year. Because that's what it's all about. It's all about creating ourselves. Not doing, but of being. We create that being through the doing, through the things that we do. But it's about who we are as human beings, what we become. And Rosh Hashanah is that day to reinvigorate, to recommit ourselves to producing something with our lives and to taking all those talents and gifts that God gave us and turning them into something. Rosh Hashanah is a day of identifying not what we want to do, but who we want to be. I have about another hour's worth of stuff to say, but I think we get the point. And I think it's an important thing not to miss the point of Rosh Hashanah. It's not just about God judging us and God sitting there trying to decide whether we deserve, whether we don't deserve. Rosh Hashanah is about us showing God that we get the point of why we were put into this world. And once we get that point, to decide that we want to do something about it. And that's all God wants to see on Rosh Hashanah. Through our davening, through sitting at our table and praying, eating all the symbolic foods and asking for a sweet year, that we turn even our meals into a moment to recognize that why am I here? I'm here to connect to God. Even at the meal, I'm here to connect to God. In my house, everywhere in my life, I'm meant to connect to God. And that's what God wants to see. Where are we holding on Rosh Hashanah? Where are we holding on the anniversary of our creation? Where are we holding on the anniversary of the day that God turned to us and said, Ayeka, where are you? How are we answering that call and that question? More than 5,000 years later. How are we answering that question of where are you? What's the here I am? And that's what Rosh Hashanah is all about. I think it's a good thought to wash over in our minds and in our hearts, and to bring out on Rosh Hashanah, to try to find it within the davening, to try to find it within the day. And then Rosh Hashanah will truly be the beginning of an incredible life, the beginning of an incredible eternity. I wish everybody a beautiful and sweet new year, and that it should be a year of productivity, a year where we climb the heights of our aspirations and become the amazing people that we have the potential to enhance and to continue to become.
Thank you, Rabbi. You too.
A good Gebench Diyar, and we'll see everybody after Simchas Torah.
Sounds good. Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Be well, everyone.
You too.
I'm going to shut down and then turn back on for Daf Yomi.
Okay. Thank you.